Perfect. So today we've got a few things on the agenda. So just to recap what we're going to be discussing, we're going to start with going through lots of federal updates since our last gathering last month. There's been lots and lots of news. And so I'm sure we missed things, or I'm sure that we're not going to be able to cover everything because there is a lot happening. But we are going to do our best to go over lots of the different updates that we've got. We'll also include some state updates in terms of what's going on around immigration at the state level, and then also share some ways that you can take action to reach out to your Congress member to make sure that they take action. And then we'll wrap up with a short discussion around the future webinar. So, originally when we had this idea of doing this monthly series, the idea was to do them on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. And so we really want to hear from you all in terms of like what kinds of topics you want to hear, what do we want to dig into. There's just so much happening, and so we'd love your input and feedback on that to sort of help us craft what the future agendas can look like. But again, for those that are just joining us, we will send out the recording and the slides after. There's going to be a lot of links that I'm going to reference in the slides, but again, once you get the slides, they'll all be in there. And so I'm not going to, I will probably not be copying links into the chat just to spare us all. But again, you will get the slides shared afterwards. So do not worry about that. All right, so again, we'll go ahead and get started with federal updates. There's a couple of executive orders that we wanted to highlight that the Trump administration or that Trump signed on the 28th of April. He issued two executive orders related to one, the first one being around sanctuary jurisdictions. So obviously, as you all know, California is often called a sanctuary state. Many of your cities or counties are often referenced in that manner as well. And so this is a very relevant and critical executive order to our state and to our cities and jurisdictions. And so this order does a lot of different things, but it's really an attempt to hold state and local governments hostage to Trump's sloppy and reckless immigration crackdown. So I've included some of the highlights here, but again, we'll link to the actual order in case you haven't read that, and then I'll share some highlights. So one of the first ones is that in 30 days, it orders the AG and the DHS secretary to publish a list of sanctuary states and local jurisdictions they deem to be defying federal immigration enforcement and target with termination of federal funds like grants and contracts. So again, highly concerning, highly problematic. And again, once we see this list, we very much expect that there's going to be California and many jurisdictions in our state on that list. And so obviously this is very concerning for us. And obviously we'll be continuing to monitor how this proceeds, but obviously this is a very direct threat to our state, and we will not be taking this lightly at all. Additionally, and maybe more concerning, it seeks to prosecute state or local officials in sanctuary cities who refuse to assist with the Trump administration's plan to deport immigrants. And so obviously we have shared, or obviously you all know, and we've talked about how our state has protections like the California Values Act and other state protections that protect and limit collaboration between local law enforcement and ICE. And so obviously this is an attempt by the federal government to direct state and local law enforcement to take action that they otherwise would not do. And so again, lots of concerning aspects related to this executive order. And then the other point is that this would also go after federal public benefits and in-state tuition. And so again, in California, we do provide in-state tuition for folks who went to high school here that maybe don't have legal status. They're able to pay in-state tuition. And that is not the case all across the country. There's several states that do that and some that don't. But again, this is a clear attack on our state and our values and the work that we've done over the many years to pass strong legislation and protections for our immigrant community. So really, it's, again, a really major threat that we're very concerned about. In all the work that we've done, again, to pass things like the Values Act and the Trust Act, we know that our communities are less safe when law enforcement focuses on arresting and deporting immigrants. because it diverts their attention and resources from addressing serious crimes. But to summarize, we think that this order has no legal basis, and that courts across the country have held that nothing in federal law can or does require states to lend their own resources to ICE's deportations. Additionally, the Trump administration is already engaged in a campaign of intimidation, including threatening state and local officials with prosecution for not assisting with the federal deportation efforts on legally baseless theories. And so, again, major executive order. And again, we'll see what happens in these 30 days, and we'll see the types of actions that the administration takes to go after our state and our communities. Additionally, on that same day, Trump also signed an executive order regarding law enforcement. And so this does a few things as well, and many of which are also very concerning. It directs the Attorney General to create a mechanism to do a few things, including providing legal resources and protection for officers facing so-called unjust legal expenses from official duties, including pro bono assistance. It also orders the maximization of the use of federal resources to improve training, increase officer pay and benefits, and seek tougher sentences for crimes against officers, enhance prison security and capacity, and improve crime data uniformity. And then, so all of that, again, it really has to do with this notion of protecting law enforcement, who Trump obviously sees as victims. And again, a lot of laws and pieces of legislation that we've worked very hard to pass in California to hold law enforcement accountable. This really comes in direct contrast with all of that. And then additionally, and also very concerning related to this, within 90 days, the plan is to increase the provision of surplus military assets to support local law enforcement. So thinking about various military equipment that the federal government might already have that they could provide to local law enforcement. So again, this has to do with the further militarization of our law enforcement, which is obviously very concerning. And so again, we'll see how this pans out in the coming days and weeks. And the last point is just that, again, similarly to the first executive order, it directs law enforcement to pursue legal action against state officials accused of obstructing criminal or immigration law. So again, this notion of seeing local and state partners as not partners, right? As the enemy, or folks that are meant to be held accountable or go after. And so again, it's going to be really interesting and or possibly frightening to see how this all plays out and sort of who the administration targets. So we'll see how that plays out. A couple of graphs that we wanted to share. This is from the New York Times. They had an article that was 8 charts of Trump's first 100 days. And 2 of them kind of stood out. The first one you can see here, that the Trump administration has issued more executive orders than any modern president, has also been sued in federal court the most. And so here you can see, it might be a little hard to see some of these numbers, but you can see here at the very top, Trump is far and above any other modern president, above FDR, 2 terms there, Truman. Trump 2017 is pretty significantly lower than the current administration. And then here towards the bottom, you see Obama in 2013. And so again, it's been a record number of executive orders that the administration has passed. Perfect. I'm seeing that some folks are having some issues, but hopefully you're able to sort that. But hopefully you can see my screen properly. And then again, in terms of lawsuits, obviously, because there's so many executive orders that are being issued, there's also a ton of lawsuits that are being filed against the Trump administration. So here as well, you can see that the number of lawsuits against the Trump administration is significantly higher than it was in the first 100 days of the Trump administration, the first one, and then Bush, Biden, and Obama are also there in comparison, which again are significantly lower. So it's been a very, very busy 100 days, and there's been a lot of different activity from the administration, but also a lot of efforts to try to hold the administration accountable when they overstep their boundary. And unfortunately, it's going to continue at this pace, and it's going to, and I'm sure we're going to continue seeing this graph grow and grow. So we'll see how it pans out. Again, we'll share this link in the slides that you can click this link here once you get the slides. But if you haven't already, on the ACLU national website, they do have this great timeline and summary of the various activities and actions that the ACLU has taken in the first 100 days, which has a really good summary, not just related to immigration, but also all the wide variety of issues that we work on. But just did want to highlight some main points here that the ACLU has filed 53 cases against the administration, and we've sought emergency relief in 38 of these cases, and we've won at least some form of preliminary or temporary order in 27 of those cases. So again, it's a really big deal. And again, we're doing all that we can to make sure that we're standing up to the administration. Perfect. And then the last thing I'll just say on this, again, this webinar is only focused on immigration, but again, there's been huge and really serious attacks on the trans community around access to healthcare, threats about cutting funding and all that stuff. And so this timeline does include a lot of other things that we aren't going to be discussing tonight, but again, I encourage you to take a look at, which again, will be linked in the slide. Okay, I did want to pause for a moment to just acknowledge some other news or some other things that have been happening since the last month that we all came together, which I'm sure you've heard of many of these, but the Trump administration through the FBI recently arrested Judge Hannah Duggan on Friday, April 25th. Trump and his administration, have on multiple occasions criticized the judicial system and judges directly. And this escalated last month when the FBI arrested Judge Hannah Duggan in Wisconsin for allegedly obstructing immigration officers and concealing someone to prevent an arrest. The individual ICE was looking for was still detained shortly thereafter. Additionally, Kash Patel, the FBI director, posted an image on social media of Judge Duggan being handcuffed and being escorted into a car. This action is deeply concerning and highlights the harmful impact of courthouse arrests and the administration's attempt to intimidate the judiciary. And it's important to note that federal law does not, once again, require state judges to act as agents of federal immigration enforcement. There is a hearing set for May 15th, where Judge Duggan is set to be arraigned. And so again, there's just lots of issues here that obviously are raised by these actions. As we noted earlier, we anticipate a lot of targeting of individuals and elected officials. And so obviously now this is also including judges who do things that the administration doesn't agree with. Another thing I want to note is this issue of courthouse arrests. There have been reports of this happening even here in California. And so would definitely encourage folks to be aware of those news events, or if you hear about them happening, to definitely reach out and let us know. I think there's been lots of efforts to try to reduce that happening in California. But again, we've seen the Trump administration really pushing on those, on the edge of those locations that were previously protected. So we've spoken about sensitive locations like courthouses and schools and health facilities in the past that were generally protected, or where ICE generally didn't go into. But again, now we're seeing that that's no longer as clear cut, and we're seeing much more of that type of enforcement happening in those types of locations. So again, definitely be on the lookout for these types of activities happening. But again, all of this is sort of still new and fresh, and so we'll sort of see how this pans out. But again, deeply concerning. We've spoken about some of these students in the past, and the way that the Trump administration has continued targeting students for their political views, and we've spoken to the way that we're deeply concerned about that as well. But we did want to just pause to just share a few updates. So the first is that Mohsen Moudawi, a Columbia University student who was arrested in April at his citizenship interview, was released on Friday. And here you can see the picture from Vermont, April 30th, of him being released. And he has committed to continue speaking out as he keeps fighting his case. And so hopefully folks have heard his interviews or read about it. But it's been a really interesting and inspiring case of someone who again, has been obviously attacked and targeted by the administration, but the way that he has shown a desire to continue fighting and to speaking out, which again is part of this whole effort, right? Is to intimidate folks and discourage folks from speaking out. And so I think that's been a really great thing to see. Additionally, we shared last month a little bit about Rumeysa Ozturk, from a Tufts University student who was arrested in March and is currently detained in Louisiana. She was supposed to be transferred to Vermont to continue challenging her detention, but the Trump administration is attempting to try to prevent this. And today, actually this morning, there was a hearing in the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals regarding this issue. And so again, the hope is that Rumeysa will be transferred back to Vermont, and where she'll be able to continue challenging her detention, which again we feel is entirely unjust. And then lastly, Mahmoud Khalil, a recent graduate of Columbia University, who remains detained in Louisiana, but last week received a couple of good news. So the U.S. District Court ruled that his lawsuit against the government for detaining him can continue. And then additionally, today, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals rejected the Trump administration's attempt to move his case from New Jersey. The government wanted the case to move forward in Louisiana, where he's currently being detained. And so, again, we hope that there will be some good news for both Rumeysa and Mahmoud soon. But again, we're going to continue to do everything that we can to uplift these cases, and we hope that there will be a positive outcome in the end. And then if you haven't already, again, we'll link here this petition at the bottom. It's a petition to urge Congress to stand up to these attacks by the Trump administration for these attacks on our First Amendment. And I think this moment is also a good reminder that if the government can come after one of us for speech the administration disagrees with, they can and will come after any of us. And so, again, wanted to sort of provide a quick update about those cases. Another case that has been getting lots and lots of attention is that of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. From everything that's been happening, I think that's been on the headlines multiple times. So here, there's a picture where for a moment there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of where he was and whether he was even alive. But fortunately, there was a meeting that happened, and it sounds like he's at least they know where he is. And so there's been lots of activity and different actions that have happened around his case in the past month since his detention, and including on April 11th. The Supreme Court ruled that the administration must try to release Kilmar Abrego Garcia from El Salvador's CECOT prison. But a month later, the administration has yet to do that. The administration has continued to allege connections to MS-13, but has failed to provide proof. And I'm sure you all saw that interesting, we'll call, interview that happened where Trump was highlighting a clearly photoshopped image of Kilmar Abrego and claiming that he had MS-13 tattooed on his hands. So again, despite the administration admitting that he was deported due to administrative error, they continue to do very little, as it seems, to actually help get him released. And so again, another petition related to this and other folks who were wrongfully deported, but after various legal challenges, again, the Supreme Court has ordered the administration to actually make an effort to try to release Kilmar. But again, we shall see how this progresses and what happens. And then also, I just want to note that, on a related note, the Trump administration has, over his first 100 days, deported immigrants not only to El Salvador, but also many countries in Central and South America. And now they are floating the idea of sending immigrants to other foreign countries, including Libya and Rwanda. Many of these immigrants are not actually from these countries and are now stranded in a country they have no connections to. So I cannot understate how horrifying all of this is. And again, just this idea that folks could be sent to a country where they aren't from and really have no plans for being able to bring them back or for being able to help them deal with the situation that they're in. And so again, just more and more bad things that are coming out of this administration that, again, should give us all pause and deep, deep concern. Additionally, we did also want to just highlight that the administration has put out a call for contractors to submit proposals to provide new detention facilities, transportation, security guards, medical support, and other administrative services worth as much as $45 billion over the next 2 years. And there have been news reports that the administration is considering using the Federal Correction Institution in Dublin and the Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield as potential new detention centers. And you probably also saw the news that the administration wants to reopen Alcatraz prison, which is now currently a tourist attraction. And so again, all of this highlights the Trump administration's focus on expanding the prison industrial complex and will only lead to further criminalization of our community. And so if you live near any of these facilities, we encourage you to join local efforts that are ongoing to try and put an end to this and make sure that local folks are standing up and voicing their opposition to this. Because again, the only way that the Trump administration is able to deport the numbers of people that he is seeking to deport is to expand capacity in terms of bed space and the ability to detain more people. And so I think this is definitely part of all of that. But again, is really just deeply concerning. And then we also wanted to take a moment to uplift everything that's been going on with the Alien Enemies Act, because similarly, there's also been lots of different pieces to this since the administration declared or invoked the Alien Enemies Act. So on April 7th, the Supreme Court decided to allow the Trump administration to continue using the Alien Enemies Act to deport immigrants, while lower court challenges continued. But the administration must give people notice and allow them to challenge their detention. So that's an important thing to know, right? Unfortunately, the Supreme Court essentially said that this act could continue being used as a method for deporting people, but it sort of noted that they needed to give folks notice and allow them to challenge their detention. So it's sort of unclear what that means and how that's essentially being implemented, but that is not exactly a good ruling from the Supreme Court. But again, there are lower court challenges that are happening. And so did want to share a couple of things. So last week, a federal court in Southern Texas ruled the Trump administration's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act does not meet the invasion or predatory incursion requirement in the law and blocked the administration from using it against anyone being held in the court's judicial district. And then yesterday, in another win, after a Freedom of Information Act request, the Freedom of the Press Foundation released an intelligence memo that brings into question the claim that the Venezuelan government controls the Tren de Agua gang, and which was one of the main reasons the administration has given for using the Alien Enemies Act, right? Essentially, they were saying that Venezuela controlled this gang and they were doing all these things on behalf of the Venezuelan government. Which again, the intelligence memo seems to make clear that that is actually not the case. And then in another win today, a federal court in New York, much like the court in Texas, also blocked removals under the Alien Enemies Act. The court ruled that the presidential proclamation exceeds the scope of the Alien Enemies Act because there is no war, invasion, or predatory incursion as required by the statute. And it also held that the government's protocols for providing notice to people about the Alien Enemies Act designations are insufficient and violate due process. So again, this was a very deeply concerning act that the president invoked. But again, even from the very beginning, it was facing lots and lots of challenges. And so already we have at least two challenges in our favor in terms of challenging the use of this. And so we'll see again how this pans out. But again, a deeply concerning method of going after folks and targeting folks and accusing people of being part of gangs and deporting them without due process. A few things we wanted to know. This is from these are numbers from DHS, so from the Trump administration. They have said that since the beginning of the year, the administration has deported over 142,000 people. Additionally, that 85 miles of new border wall construction are either planned or under construction. And then additionally, they've highlighted that they've put together 579 new 287G agreements, which allow local and state law enforcement agencies to work together with ICE to enforce immigration laws. During his campaign, Trump promised to deport at least 1 million immigrants annually. So these numbers are below target, but also suggest that this is just the beginning of more widespread immigration enforcement. So, first, just want to take a moment that 142,000 is still a very large number, right? These are 142,000 individuals, who were part of our community, who had people who cared about them. And so I think it's really important to just acknowledge that is a large number and the impact that that's obviously already having, and the fear and all of that that's having, that effect that it's having on the community, I think cannot be understated. And so, folks are joining from different parts of the state, but if you think of how large your city is, right, like if you just imagine that a number of people being removed in 100 days, it's pretty significant. And then just wanted to take a moment to also just note these 287G agreements. I think here in California, we've essentially barred this through the Values Act and other protections that we have in the state, but obviously that's not the case in other parts of the country. And so other parts of the country have less immigration-friendly laws, and they have local and state law enforcement agencies that are very eager to collaborate with ICE. And so this is very unfortunate because, again, this allows local law enforcement to essentially act as ICE agents and enforce immigration law, which, again, we don't think should be the purpose of what law enforcement are focused on. But again, this really does just say that, like, I'm sure that he's not happy with these numbers, right? And so I think there's been articles and things that have noted about how they're exploring different ideas, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those later, but I think it's clear that this is just the beginning and that things are only going to get worse. And so, I think it's not good at all. And so with that, I think I wanted to sort of take a moment to just highlight a few headlines that, again, we've missed a lot and we're not going to be able to talk about everything, but did want to highlight this first one here. From the BBC, ICE recently deported at least 2 families, including 2 mothers and their minor children, 3 of whom are U.S. citizen children, ages 2, 4, and 7. The 4-year-old was also battling, or is battling stage 4 cancer, and was removed without their medication. In addition, one of the mothers is also currently pregnant, and prior to deportation, their attorneys and family had issues communicating with them. And so it all happened very, very quickly. And so obviously the administration has continued to claim that, the mother chose to take the children with them, but it's unclear how much choice they actually had if they were sort of, swept up and deported very, very quickly without being able to communicate with their attorneys and family and all that stuff. And so again, deeply, deeply concerning. And again, the administration seems to not think that this was a big deal. Additionally, the Trump administration here from the PBS NewsHour, the Trump administration recently announced that it would be offering immigrants $1,000 to self-deport using the CBP Home app. So the idea is that they want to encourage folks to essentially sign up to be self-deported, and by offering them a flight and $1,000 stipend to go back to their home country. Again, this is one of their great and creative ideas that they have come up with, which again is very concerning. I think there's a lot of doubt amongst advocates in the community about the validity of this and whether they would actually follow through with anything. And so, this does obviously require folks to sort of self-report themselves and sort of put themselves at risk. And so, again, we'll see how many people take them up on this offer, and again, whether it's a real thing that they'll be actually doing. And then here, Meet the Press, during an interview on Meet the Press, when asked from NBC News, during an interview on Meet the Press, asked whether every person in the U.S. was entitled to due process, Trump said, "I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know." And he went on to say that we'd have to have millions of trials seemingly complaining about due process and respecting the Constitution. And so again, just really strange and concerning comments from the administration and from Trump himself related to how he is approaching this issue. And then lastly, in one of the largest deportation operations, ICE recently touted a 1 week total of 1,120 arrests throughout the state of Florida. And many of the arrests were actually done by Florida Highway Patrol and local police who were also involved in this operation. And so, again, states like Florida are very eager to collaborate with the administration to target immigrants. And so I'm sure that we will be seeing more of this. But again, that's a very huge number in terms of the number of people that were wrapped up in this operation. And again, this was over 1 week, but still, that's obviously a very concerning number in terms of the number of people that were detained. And so, yeah, we'll sort of leave it at that. Again, we'll provide you with the slides and we'll provide you with the different links to, I'm seeing some questions about the executive orders. And so again, those will be linked there. And I'm seeing also a question about the Travis Detention Center. That's a good question. I can definitely include that in the follow-up. I know that's a very recent development in terms of the Travis Detention Center in Fairfield. But I think generally speaking, there's a number of immigrant advocates in the state that are always looking to take action and fight back. And so I'm sure that there's activity happening there. But if you're from Fairfield or the surrounding area and you have more information about that, please feel free to share that. I know with Dublin, whenever the news came out from that, there was a couple of rallies and there's been lots of organizing happening there. I know this Travis one, I think, was a little bit more recently. And so there may be still things that are happening there. All right, so let's move now to state updates. Oh, sorry, one more question about impact on Florida's economy. Yeah, it's a great question. I will say that Florida also passed a lot of anti-immigrant bills, in the past year or so that really made it difficult for immigrants to live in Florida. And so I know there was some folks that were leaving, and I think that that's still sort of to be determined in terms of how all of this has an impact on Florida's economy, which obviously is also facing various other challenges in terms of tariffs and other issues like that as well. Great. Yes, so yeah, some people are also coming here. I think there was a recent report about California's population growing for the first time since the pandemic, slightly, which I did find interesting. All right, so first we wanted to start with sharing some good news. So last Tuesday, a federal district court in California issued a preliminary injunction barring U.S. Border Patrol from using stop and arrest practices that violate federal law and the U.S. Constitution. U.S. District Judge Jennifer Thurston's ruling in United Farm Workers v. Nome applies to future Border Patrol operations conducted in the Eastern District of California, which stretches from Bakersfield to the Oregon border. In January, Border Patrol agents from the El Centro sector traveled to Kern County, where they stopped and arrested people and transported them 300 miles south to El Centro, denied them due process, and coerced them into voluntary departure. And so, again, this was a deeply traumatizing thing that happened in January. And this was, if I'm not mistaken, this was still during the Biden administration. And so this was early January, where lots of folks were rounded up and essentially targeted because they were brown and they weren't given due process. And again, these are agents that came from El Centro, and so this was very much not anywhere near their jurisdiction. And again, ended up with a lot of folks being caught up in the system and a lot of folks being deported because of that operation. But obviously, we'll see what happens here. This is just the beginning of this. But again, these are the types of activities that I think we will continue to see more of in the coming weeks and months, unfortunately. But again, hopefully this ruling does have some consequence and some changes in terms of the actions of Border Patrol. But this was a great victory recently, and again, this case will continue to progress. Some more good news. I'm not going to get into each of the individual bills, and again, we'll link the specific bills if you want to read exactly what they do. But I'll provide sort of a quick highlight of each and just say that a lot of these essentially try to go after the California Values Act. But some good news on all this is that all of these bills are either dead, have failed, or being delayed, which is also a good thing. And so I think there was a lot of efforts happening in Sacramento to try to water down the Values Act or try to eliminate some of the protections that we have here in the state. But fortunately, folks in the state legislature are standing up and pushing back on these efforts. So more good news on that front. Some more state updates. Did want to highlight this report that the state did on the status or the quality of detention centers. To put it in maybe not the best words, but basically every year the state is required to do an assessment of the various detention centers. Here you can see on the map we've got 6 of them here in the state. And just to know, right, earlier I pointed Dublin and Fairfield, right, are more northern in the state, and so it's clear that they're trying to potentially open up detention facilities in areas where they don't already have capacity. But we've got one or 2 in Bakersfield, maybe 3. 2, I think it's just 2 in Bakersfield. That dot should not be there. There's 2 in Adelanto, 2 in Adelanto and then 1 in Imperial and San Diego. I think this is one of these is El Centro, but basically San Diego region and Southern California for the most part. And so again, it's clear that the administration is seeking to fill in some of the gaps in the areas where they don't have detention centers. But encourage you all to take a look at the report. I think some of the main highlights that are included in the report deal with deficiencies in record keeping and maintenance of healthcare files, in suicide prevention and intervention strategies. Also the use of the disproportionate use of force against individuals with mental health diagnoses. And then it notes that facilities generally were not conducting the mental health reviews before imposing disciplinary measures. And no facilities consistently offered adequate psychotherapy services. There was staffing vacancies and hiring challenges at many of the facilities. And then also they did not satisfy their obligations to ensure that mental health conditions did not prevent detainees from participating in their immigration legal proceedings. So again, it's a report that happens annually, and again, just really highlights the inadequacy of these detention centers and how these are just obviously not places where anybody should be held. And again, the fact that they're seeking to build more of them is obviously not a good thing. But again, did want to highlight this as something that it is a good thing in terms of that the state isn't having an assessment of these facilities and really bringing to light some of the bad conditions in the centers. But again, there's only so much that can be done with the information. I think in an ideal world, right, these detention centers wouldn't exist. All right, so quickly, I'm going to run through a few sort of ways that folks can take action, and then again, we'll sort of wrap up with a discussion on sort of what folks want to hear more of, and see if there's some additional questions in the chat that we haven't gotten to. Okay, so one big thing that's happening that I'm sure you all are hearing about related to cuts and reconciliation and federal funding and all that that we wanted to talk about. So last week, the Trump administration released the 2026 proposed budget, which includes $163 billion in cuts and additional money for DHS, almost $44 billion for more money for DHS, which again includes immigration enforcement there. The House and Senate are working on their own proposals and will pass their budget bills through the reconciliation process. So that process basically makes it easier to pass the bill and will not require bipartisan support. And so, we'll sort of see how this plays out. But some things to point out: the current proposals include large increases for immigration fees, including for asylum sponsorships, temporary protection status, and work authorization. So, even for folks who have status, the idea of paying more for their fees, whether that's DACA or some other protection, the plans that are currently making their way through Congress essentially aim to raise revenue through that method. And so, think about folks who are seeking asylum who have no money, who are already who have already suffered and have already gone through whatever journey they've gone through to seek that, and then on top of that, having to pay thousands of dollars in order to be able to be granted whatever relief they are seeking. Again, it's just more and more on top of more bad things. And then additionally, it also includes funding to expand detention bed space to 100,000 and more construction of the border wall and barriers. So currently there's about bed space for about 50,000 people throughout the country. And so the idea is to essentially double that to be able to, again, detain more people and sort of get them through that process of removing more people. So again, just really priorities that are just not in line with our values and the things that we believe in, right? This $163 billion in cuts is obviously going to be devastating for most people. And again, this increase in funding and the ways that they want to target folks, I think, is really just cruel. And again, just doesn't reflect values of us, of the organization, and hopefully of you all as well. And so definitely want to be very mindful of what happens there, because I think the current timeline is July 4th, I think is what folks are saying, that they want to pass something by then. And so I think over the next month and a half or so, I think we're going to see more details be released and more votes happening. And so getting Congress to make sure to stand up, I think is going to be really important. And so again, this is not new, but there's a petition going around to members of Congress to tell them to protect Medicaid at all costs. We know that that Medicaid is a lifeline for children and adults with disabilities, and millions of other folks who depend on it for their health care. And so again, this is one of the big things that I'm sure you all have heard that is sort of on the chopping block. I think they have sort of floated, there's a number floating around about $800 billion that could potentially be cut. Again, as a way to then either fund other programs or just further their cuts that they're trying to make. And you might be thinking, gee, Louise, why are we talking about Medicaid in a webinar about immigration? But obviously, this doesn't just impact immigrants, but again, this is also just part of that larger plan to sort of reset priorities, right, for the federal government, to say that things like Medicaid are bad and things like immigration enforcement are good, and that's where we need to allocate more money, which obviously is not something that we want. And then similarly, and very much related, there's also lots of other programs that are related to community safety that are also on the chopping block. So we saw last year, obviously with Prop 36, where that measure passed overwhelmingly in California. There's just sort of been a slide in the wrong direction, in our view, against programs that work and that are effective at really keeping communities safe. And again, envision a world beyond just law enforcement providing that safety. So there are lots of programs that are on the chopping block, including programs that provide mentorship to children, reduce violence, help people find housing, create employment opportunities, and more. And so again, there's also a petition for this that goes to your member of Congress, but also we encourage you to reach out by calling them and putting pressure, as folks have been doing for many weeks and months, in terms of showing up at their town halls or community events and really making sure that that they listen. And then I think just a quick note on this too, right? Obviously, we know that we know what control of Congress looks like at the moment, and so obviously this is really going to depend on certain Republicans voting against their party. And so I think, again, we can't understate how much of an uphill battle that's going to be. But again, this is obviously going to impact their constituents. And so I think this is important to raise with everyone, not just folks who you might think would support these things. And then we have shared a version of this slide before, but I wanted to uplift the importance of rapid response networks. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to get connected with your local network and volunteer in whatever capacity is needed. They often need volunteers to help answer calls of ICE sightings and for people to go out in the community to confirm the validity of these reports. If Congress moves forward with giving the Trump administration a blank check to expand their deportation machine, these local networks will be critical to support immigrant communities. So we encourage you to save your local number that's listed here, and then also to visit the local networks websites, which we've also listed, that you'll be able to follow those links to get involved. Again, those numbers we mentioned earlier, 142,000 people that have been caught up in the deportation pipeline. Those numbers will only continue to grow. And then also the number of locations, I think, is also likely to grow. And so thinking about more activity in your community, I think is going to be more likely than not. And so I think being able to tap into these rapid response networks is going to be really key, whether that's just you seeing something that looks suspicious or a nice vehicle and calling the number to report that so that folks can confirm, or again, volunteering your time, I think is really important. So definitely uplift these and encourage your community and others in your networks to use these resources, because again, I think this is going to be really important. All right. So with that, we're going to wrap up with a poll and a short discussion. So actually, let me see if there's any questions before we move to that. All right. So thank you. Yes, I will include the full list of places where you can visit in case your county is not covered. It is Northern California, but that's why I think some of SoCal or San Diego folks, if you're joining us, those aren't listed. But I'll make sure to include a link so you can find your local one. Let's see. Yes, we will be sharing these links. It says, are we going to start advocating for state mutual aid funds to be directed away from state budgets and to CBOs? Great suggestion. I think that's definitely important work that we can think about. Can we schedule legal observer trainings with ACLU for our rapid response networks? Great questions. Feel free to reach out to me and we can have discussions about that if you're interested in that. Many of the rapid response networks have their own trainings and capacities. I know that they do ongoing trainings, but if that's something that you might need support with, we can see if maybe that's something that we can provide or connect you with another organization, because I know there's NLG and a bunch of other organizations who do a great job with those as well. Are there ACLU experts that could do something about cybersecurity training? Yes, definitely. So maybe we will incorporate that into the suggested topics in the next slides, because I think that's a great suggestions. We've got a question. Are farm owners doing anything to protect their workers? Speaking out. Great question. I think if you are connected or know any farm workers, would definitely encourage folks to let them know what's happening and to speak out. I think I saw something, another proposal that the administration was floating, that essentially would allow farmers to allow workers to come in the country, their workers to come back in the country if they leave first and then come back, but there wasn't any sort of like legal protection. And so I think a lot of the ideas or proposals that are being floated are not serious for sure. So I think it's important for everyone to speak out in this moment. And what are we doing to move our lawmakers away from traditional means of legislating, since the regime isn't? Great question. Yes, I'll just say this. We earlier in the year, we were very excited about the idea of California moving forward with really big, bold vision for immigration in the form of a bill potentially or other methods. And I think it's been very challenging to talk to folks about immigration. And I think there's a little bit of hesitancy for a variety of reasons. But I think that we're definitely in a moment where we definitely need to think beyond the way that we've been thinking and really look at different and new ideas. Okay, and then perfect. So I will go ahead and move us onto this poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. It's 3 questions. And then if folks could fill it out, that would be greatly appreciated. So the first one is, when it comes to immigration, what are you interested in hearing more about? So again, thinking about moving forward, if we continue these webinars in June, July, August through the summer, when it comes to these, are you interested in hearing more about federal immigration issues, state immigration issues, local immigration issues, or all of the above? I think we've generally tried to touch on a variety of different issues at a variety of levels, but sometimes, obviously, it's hard to cover everything. And then question 2, do you prefer that we cover a large number of topics or that we cover less but go more in depth? And so I think that's another option. We could spend a whole hour talking about one of the things that we talked about today. I think it's really up to you all. And then lastly, here are just some ideas, some topics. Feel free to select any that you would like us to cover in the future. And again, it kind of helps us shift or make any shifts if we need to in terms of the content of the webinars. And then additionally, in the follow-up email that I send you all, I'll also sort of make an ask of folks to just share any ideas that you might have, or you can also drop them into the chat if you have other ideas that aren't included in that third question. If you're thinking, hey, I would love for us to talk about this, or I hope you would talk about that, feel free to either drop it in the chat there or email me after. But again, if you can fill out those 3 questions, we'd greatly appreciate it. Looks like most people have answered the first 2. Feel free to fill out the third one. And then I'll end it in 30 seconds. And then we can kind of take a look at some of the results. Yes, we will send out the recording and the slides. You should be able to scroll down to the third question. Let me know if you're not able to see that. It says, what specific topics would you like us to cover in future events? Okay, we've got a good number of folks who filled it out, so appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, but again, feel free to email your responses if you didn't get a chance to fill it out, if you'd like to share any feedback as well. Okay, so sharing the results here for the first question, when it comes to immigration, what are you interested in hearing more about? Looks like 72% of folks were interested in all of the above, and I think there's a pretty good split among folks who had a preference for an individual issue, so that's helpful. That I think we can kind of focus on at any level of government. Okay, a little bit of there's a plurality, at least, of folks who want less topics but more in depth. So I think we could definitely throw some of those in where we just pick a topic and really dig into some of those a little bit more rather than jumping through 100 different topics, because there really is just so much happening. And then lastly, it looks like there's a pretty good split on various issues, including ACLU lawsuits, local law enforcement collaboration, state bills, and then ways to take action. Yeah, and I think right now is definitely that moment where I think a lot of folks are looking at ways to take action. What can we do? How can we actually have an impact? So much feels very helpless or just very challenging and difficult. And so I think in this moment, we're really looking for ways to be able to amplify our voice in the most impactful way. Okay, so really quickly, before we wrap up, feel free to drop any of this into the chat. There's just a few questions here. Beyond what was mentioned in the poll, are there specific issues you'd like to hear more about? Do you have suggestions for speakers you'd like us to bring on? Maybe you're like, hey, would love to hear about that such and such person who argued this case, or would love to hear more about what's going on in Sacramento or something like that. And then lastly, what is happening locally in your community regarding immigration? So I think that's really just a question, just like if there's, if your sheriff maybe is making some concerning comments, or maybe your board of supervisor is hinting at wanting to collaborate more with ICE or things like that. Like, are there ways that we can sort of uplift some of the things that are happening to make sure that we are, bringing more attention to whatever issue is happening in your community? Things like that. So feel free to respond to any of these that as you'd like. And then I'll just sort of monitor the chat to see if folks have any suggestions. There's a suggestion for what are options for forcing administration compliance with court orders? Great question. And honestly, we're about to find out. I think that we're at the precipice of that so-called constitutional crisis. And I think the Kilmer-Abrego case was sort of one obvious current instance where the Supreme Court has told the administration to do something, and again, almost a month later, there's been what appears to be very little action. So I think that there's definitely going to be something there, but also there's a ton of other issues that are all going through the legal process, and so I think it's only a matter of time before we see something more serious, and so. I think that's we're going to have to see how it plays out. Okay, we've got some. Would love to hear about support and advocacy to our students, California universities. Great. Yes, yeah, we're seeing a lot of attacks. Columbia, Tufts, and Harvard. Maybe less so that I've heard in the news for California universities, but maybe that's to come. Great, and yes, there was a suggestion about cybersecurity, phone usage, and sort of info sharing. So I think that's also a really great suggestion. Great, got an example from Monterey County Sheriff who has expressed fear of prosecution and loss of federal funds as a reason to continue cooperating with ICE. Yeah, and again, with these new executive orders, I think that's going to become more relevant because I think he could call up the Monterey County Sheriff, right, or any other sheriff or law enforcement official that the administration has a relationship with, put pressure on them. All right, so it is 6:30. Please keep sharing with us. Again, I'll send a follow-up email later in the week. But if you have other thoughts or ideas, please reach out to us at changemakers@ecuunc.org. Really appreciate you all for joining us tonight for this discussion. We hope it was useful. And again, we can't always cover everything, but we've done our best to try to provide you with a good summary of what's going on. And again, I'll share out the recording and the slides to make sure that you have access to those. So with that, thank you so much.